Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Becoming an Empowered Parent online series, offering expert tools for embracing imperfection, building connection, and creating more peace and joy within your family. I am so thrilled that you're here. This happens to be the last day, the final day in this series, and what an incredible experience it's been. They say time flies when we're having fun. So I'm so thrilled that you're here today and that you've been able to join us throughout. I'm your host, Debbie Zeichner. I'm a parent coach, mindfulness facilitator, and licensed clinical social worker. And today I am absolutely thrilled and honored to be joined by the wonderful Susan Stiffelman, who is joining us today to talk all about parenting with presence. And as I told Susan earlier, I couldn't think of a more perfect person and more perfect topic to kind of wrap us up and kind of put everything that we've been talking about all together, bringing all the pieces together on this last day. So Susan, again, welcome, and thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me here.
Yeah, I'm so looking forward to this. So before we dive into this very important and rich topic, I'd like to share with you a bit more about Susan and her background. Susan Stiffelman is a licensed marriage, family, and child therapist, an educational therapist, and a highly lauded speaker. She's the author of Parenting Without Power Struggles, Raising Joyful, Resilient Kids While Staying Cool, Calm, and Connected, and Parenting with Presence, Practices for Raising Conscious, Confident, Caring Kids, an Eckhart Tolle edition. Susan offers online events for parents around the world on topics such as raising tweens and teens, parenting in the digital age, and raising siblings. And she also hosts 2 monthly support groups, one with Wendy Bahari on co-parenting with a narcissist, and the other is Parenting Without Power Struggles, which meets twice a month for parents with kids of all ages. Susan has offered weekly advice as the Huffington Post weekly parent coach advice columnist and the Ask the Therapist columnist for grandparents.com. Her work has been featured on the Today Show, publications like the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal, and countless print and radio interviews. So as I've been talking to Susan earlier, I've been such a huge fan and follower of Susan's work, and really just, she so beautifully writes and teaches on the power of attachment and connection in the parent-child relationship, as well as really just the importance of understanding and supporting ourselves on this parenting journey, which is so incredibly important. And as I shared with Susan earlier, we both share a passion for mindfulness. So that's also something that's really special for me. And again, it's just such a treat to have her with us. So again, Susan, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
So now that we know more about you professionally, I'm wondering if you could share a bit with us about your journey and how you got into this work.
Okay. My journey began in Kansas City when I was about 15 or 16 years old. I found a book called Autobiography of a Yogi, which kind of resonated very deeply with me and sparked an interest in meditation at a very young age. So from that point on, meditation practice became kind of a cornerstone of my life, but I didn't talk too much about it in my professional work. I went to college, I became a credentialed teacher. I decided to move on some years later and get a degree in clinical psychology, and that eventually led to a license as a psychotherapist. Because I had both backgrounds, the educational background and the psychological emotional, I kind of fused those two in the work I was doing with families, where I might see a child because it seemed like they were having academic issues and find out that it was actually informed by an emotional challenges. And vice versa, I might see a child who appeared to have some psychological difficulty, but actually they had a learning style incompatibility with the way they were being taught. So all these things kind of evolved, and I began doing work more and more with parents because I saw that if I could work with them directly, they could have more of an impact than their child seeing me once a week. So I began doing workshops. And over time, people would ask me to come home with them and be with them every day. And well, I can't really do that. I wrote a book, and the book kind of catalyzed more and more in-person events, speaking engagements and workshops. And still, I could only be in one place at one time, as far as we know, technologically speaking. So I started to do a lot of virtual work, which is sort of the substance of what I do now. We have a large online community of parents around the world. We, as you say, we do the monthly membership program, Parenting Without Power Circle. So I get to coach people and walk them through incremental changes, comfortable changes. And then Wendy and I do the co-parenting with a narcissist. We do lots and lots of master classes on all kinds of topics, and as you mentioned, and it's been a beautiful fusion of who I am at the core and what I stand for and my passion and my heart, and how we can use technology as we are right now to make contact with parents from every corner of the world to help them break with old patterns, the inherited knee-jerk ways that we have of reacting to things that our kids do that challenge us, and to learn and integrate more conscious, more present ways of engaging.
Thank you for sharing that with us. And, just to be able to learn mindfulness from such a young age, to me, is just absolutely remarkable. I learned later in life, and I always say, gosh, I wish I would have had these tools from a much younger age. And so to be able to, as you do in your work, sort of help parents learn how to be more present and sort of learn just mindfulness in this way, and to be able to infuse that into their parenting and pass that on to their children, I just think is such a beautiful thing, an opportunity for our kids. So I'd love to start with really the foundation of your work, right? And the beautiful title of your book, which is Parenting with Presence. And if you wanted just to kind of share with us a bit more about what that means. So, many of us may have heard about parenting with presence, and we may understand it on an intellectual level. And I'd love to be able to go a little bit deeper, as well as look at and understand what might be getting in the way of our ability to parent with presence. What can we be looking out for?
Great. So your 4-year-old comes up to you and says, Mommy, I really want to tell you about this butterfly I saw. And they're on fire, they're lit up, and you are thinking about that email that you hope your boss has sent by now, or you're thinking about your older kids in the other room who are suspiciously quiet, or you're thinking about, the pile of dishes in the sink, or you're thinking about your own, you want to get on Instagram and see if people like that cute photo that you put of your happy family, like whatever it is. There's always competition for our attention, always. And in this world of digital screen life, where a lot of it comes at a very high stimulated level, so there's lots of endorphins and good dopamine that gets pumped into your brain, particularly if you go check your digital device, and there's your 4-year-old wanting to very slowly and in great detail tell you about the butterfly. It's hard to leave the either compelling thing of the worry about your kids in the other room, or the pile of dishes, or the screen stuff, to be all here. Now, one of the great things about children, if we're lucky and if they're pretty healthy, is that they will in some way tell you when you're not there because they want all of you, and they want all of you to be in the room with them when they make a bid for your attention. And when that isn't fulfilled, they'll yank on you, they'll talk louder, they'll spill something, they'll poke the brother. And so you could see them as a wonderful gift, like an alarm system for you, like, okay, you're not here, come back. A lot of things can get in the way, of course. The speed that our mind likes to function at, and that's getting faster and faster because we're so engaged with so many multitasks on our screens, and partial attention is becoming the norm. Also, sometimes it's just not that fun or interesting, the thing that our child is inviting us to attend to. It's just not that fascinating. And one of the things that I really encourage parents to do is to, in a very loving and non-judgmental way, acknowledge for themselves, oh gosh, this story looks like it could take a while. Or I really feel pulled to go check my Instagram. I really feel called. I just really want 10 minutes, by myself, or 3 minutes by myself. So the more you can acknowledge it without judging it or criticizing yourself, or trying to, compare yourself to some imagined parent who would be absolutely engrossed in every utterance from their 4-year-old, These people, by the way, don't exist.
Right.
So the more you can be accepting, okay, this is a struggle right now. I want to be here. A part of me wants to give my child this, all of myself, and another part of me doesn't. And I think parenting with presence begins with acknowledging sort of that push-pull. And then, of course, it can invite us to look at some of, I call them the dark and dusty corners of our own childhood, the places where we're not complete or healed, things that can get stirred up for us, depending on what our child might be doing, that make it really hard to be present because it triggers us in a very deep way. It kind of revitalizes or regurgitates stuff that we've sort of shoved down that makes it harder to be present for what's going on.
So really that acknowledgement is really the cornerstone, it sounds like, of this, and giving ourselves permission that it's okay that we're not fully engrossed in the caterpillar or the butterfly that our child is showing us, or that we're thinking about the dishes, or that, you know, we forgot to do this or that's part of what really, I mean, the human experience is, right?
Yeah.
It takes a lot to bring us in. And it's really, I mean, that's the thing I love about mindfulness, is that it's called a practice, and it's called a practice for a reason, right? It's something that we have to really continually work on, which is exactly what you're speaking to, is just being able to start with acknowledging and have that be okay. And I think even just the fact of you mentioning it, I mean, we can all relate to the Instagram post or this or that. So it just, you know, parents, for those of you listening and watching, see, you're not alone, right? We all go through this. So we all experience this. That's part of the human condition. So thank you so much for sharing that with us. So in your work, you talk a lot about being the captain of the ship. And I wonder if you could briefly tell us more about that. What does that look like? What does that sound like?
Love to. One of my favorite things to talk about. So I use my hands to illustrate. So if you're just listening to this, try and follow along in your imagination. But if you imagine that your right hand represents the parent and the left hand represents your child. And in this, I'm holding my right hand above my left to suggest the parent being on top. It's not about the parent being more worthy, more wonderful, more deserving of respect or any of that. It's just that the parent is in charge, lovingly and calmly in charge. And I call this position with the right hand above the left being the captain of the ship. And that means that if you were a passenger on a ship and maybe you're having dinner with the captain and everything is sweet and lovely, and then you hear the whoop, whoop, whoop alarm go off, you want to see the captain spring into action with confidence. You don't want to see the captain going, oh my God, what's going on, and leap over the side of the ship. You want that captain to exude alpha energy, that capability of coping or dealing with whatever might be going on. And so, you know, that's very, very comforting to children when we hold that place for them as the loving captain of the ship. And that means that we are present, we're available, we're not in argument with reality. I've done a lot of work, wonderful sessions with Byron Katie, whose work I just so love. And she and I got to do a number of series on parenting. And so this has been more and more embedded in me, that when we're holding that captain place, we are capable of being present with what is. So now the child might say, well, I really want to have peanut butter candy for dinner. And you say, well, sweetheart, we're having something else for dinner, but I see how much you would like that. It's so tasty. Why can't I have it, says the child? Because it's got tons of sugar in it and nothing nutritional. Well, what do you mean? It's got peanut butter. Well, yeah, but it's a modified thing. It's just a flavoring. No, it doesn't. Grandma lets me have them. Grandma says peanut butter is really good for you. Yeah, but grandma's just trying to make you happy. And grandma doesn't really listen to me when I tell her what you shouldn't have. You don't even care about grandma. So now we have nobody in charge. The two hands are side by side. I call this the two lawyers. So my right hand is no longer above the left. It's beside the left. And we're pushing back and forth against each other, justifying, arguing, negotiating, and this is a power struggle. And inside of us, we feel kind of an escalating frustration. Why can't they just do what I ask? Why does everything have to become a battle? Why? Now, it can get worse where the child hand moves above the parent's hand. The parent is below then in this dynamic. And the child is saying, well, if you won't let me have peanut butter candy for dinner, I'm not even going to eat your stupid dinner. And you're feeling, God, I work so hard to get good, healthy food, and I'm making all this effort, and nobody around here appreciates anything I do. And so inside, we may really be feeling unappreciated, disrespected, out of control. Maybe we start thinking, oh my gosh, I'm raising this child who's so entitled, and so we're projecting into a future something that about who this child's going to become based on this incident. And the child senses that we're out of control, and so they're, flaunting this sort of faux power. They're moving into an alpha relationship with us, and in an attempt to pretend or feel that we're in charge, which is in this case more in control, which is not what I teach. We feel out of control, so we overpower the child with threats, with intimidation, with punishments, with bribes. If you don't eat that, if you refuse to eat this dinner I made you, then fine, the next meal you have will be breakfast, or go to your room, you're grounded, whatever it might be. And it doesn't come from confidence and strength. It comes from this insecurity that we have. And I call this position where our hand is below the child's the dictator, because dictators don't have authentic power. They rule by fear and intimidation. They wipe out your family. They, empty your bank account. They throw you in jail. And so my work is really built on this idea of helping parents work through whatever gets in the way of being that calm captain of the ship, whatever moves them to drop them into lawyer or dictator mode. And that's very deep internal work, but it's beautiful work, because in the course of doing that, not only do we give our children this thing that they really, really need, they need to be able to depend on us. It's a hierarchical relationship. The parent-child relationship is meant to be one of dependence of the child on the parent, not vice versa. So we give the child something they so deeply need, but also we can heal the things in us that are unfinished. If we didn't have a supportive parent, or a parent who was able to be present, or a parent who just overpowered us with punishments and bribes or intimidation, we get to move through the healing of that in the course of these challenging moments with our children.
That's so helpful to know about that and understand it in that way, right? So it's that calm confidence, and being able to develop that sense of calm confidence, and understanding that so often when we move into that dictator role, we're moving to this very controlling place, often at a time when we're feeling really out of control. So Susan, I want to read a quote from your book, which says, "The child we have is the one who can teach us what we most need to learn." Right? And your book really invites us to look at how our children's challenging behaviors really provide such an opportunity for us to look at our own stuff, our own unresolved issues, our own unfinished business, that they really are our biggest teachers. And I wonder if you could sort of share with us suggestions that you might have for parents who are finding themselves in these constant power struggles, finding themselves very easily triggered by their child. How can we begin that process of uncovering what it is that our child might be trying to teach us?
Great. So I'll start by saying that I talk about something called snapshot child syndrome. And what that means is that we're holding this photograph of this ideal child. Okay, this is the child who takes out the trash the first time you ask. This is the child who loves sports like you do, loves music like you do, and has an outgoing personality like you do. And then there's that other child over there. So, sweetheart, would you take out the trash? They don't even acknowledge that you exist. They are ignoring you, or they say, no, I'm busy. And you're going, wait a minute, this is the child who was taking out the trash, and that one over there is refusing or ignoring me. Ouch. And all these feelings can rise to the surface. And we think that they rise to the surface because our child isn't listening to us or cooperating with us. But I think that there's more to it. And that it's because that child over there isn't this child here. And so I call this snapshot child syndrome, that we're holding the snapshot of this idealized child. And quite often there's a big mismatch between this child and that one. If you have a child, for instance, if you're very introverted and quiet and that child's very extroverted, or if you love art and that child wants nothing to do with it. And certainly if you have an atypically developing child, all of these things can give rise to ongoing frustration or misunderstanding or sorrow.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of the steps in dealing with that is to make room for those feelings. Gosh, I'm so disappointed. I really wanted to share my passion for art with, Julia, or
Mm-hmm.
I'm overpowered by how intense she is and how loud she is. I wouldn't have said this out loud. I wanted whatever child I got, but there's a part of me that just is exhausted by her intensity.
Mm-hmm.
And the more we can bring that up to the surface and not keep making Julia wrong for being Julia,
Mm-hmm.
then the more Julia becomes a catalyst for our own growth and transformation, because it may call to mind, for instance, Julia might be frustrated by the fact that we don't like the things she likes, or may try and get us to be bigger and louder and more like her,
Mm-hmm.
which may bring up experiences from our own childhood where who we were wasn't enough, or we weren't a match for our own parent or our own siblings, and we were scolded or told to be louder, bigger, better at sports, whatever the thing was that wasn't our thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so when those feelings can be given room to air, like, oh, I see this is sort of, this snapshot child thing is actually a gift. It's great that she's not exactly like this thing I pictured, because I get to explore those parts of myself that I sort of buried in terms of not being celebrated for exactly who I was as a child, or maybe in the current time. Maybe the thing that gets triggered for us is that our kids ignore us. And it brings up this feeling of being invisible or not having a voice or not being respected. And maybe that shows up a lot in the workplace every day when we go to work. And so we have a big, big reaction to our child because it's stirring up these feelings that we aren't expressing at work. So one of the ways that you know that there's something to work with is that the resentment can build, the feelings can build, and maybe you have what would look to the outside looking in like a disproportionate reaction, like your child won't take out the trash, and that could happen 5 days in a row, and on the 6th day it's like, God, would you listen to me?
Mm-hmm.
Nobody around here ever does anything I want. And you can go, oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of shaming yourself or
Mm-hmm.
feeling like a terrible parent, oh, there's something there to work with.
Something.
And what is that?
Which I think is so, just again, it's like about that presence, allowing us to be present in that moment and giving ourselves that permission, right? Of understanding sort of the child that we have versus the child that we imagine, or these expectations, right? I think that there's so much about these expectations that we place on ourselves. We place them on our child that are often so unrealistic or unreasonable. And yet I think that, as you're saying, it's that wake-up call that we're so often handed, especially when we have our own reactivity, right? And if we're not aware of that, or that's really a message and such a gift and such an opportunity, then we might miss it. And then we stay on this path of this constant, as you described. So I think it's such an important thing for parents to really know about and think about, that when we are just feeling that angst, that's something to look at. It's an opportunity, and just starting that process.
Yes.
So, this series is really all about embracing imperfection and building connection, as we've been talking about. And, so many parents that I work with, and I'm sure that you see all the time, there's so much guilt, so much shame, that negative, relentless inner critic, right? That just seems to play such a role, right? Where I'm not strict enough, I'm too strict, I'm too much of this, I'm not good at this, it's relentless, which is also disconnecting.
Yeah.
Right. And so I wonder, kind of going along with this idea, what suggestions do you have for parents who are really struggling with this guilt and this shame? Right? How can we as parents learn to really embrace these imperfections so that we can show up with this presence that we so desperately want and need? I know that guilt and shame is just something that comes up over and over again for parents.
In a microscopic homeopathic dose, a little bit of guilt or discomfort with how we showed up with our child can be helpful, because it can remind us that we want to make a repair with our kids. And that's a very positive thing to do. So we talk all the time about not being a perfect parent, being a good enough parent.
Mm-hmm.
And what that looks like is modeling for your kids what it sounds like, how you approach someone when you have not shown up in the way that you would have hoped.
Mm-hmm.
And so a little discomfort is great. The rest of it is completely useless because there's just that mean voice in your head. And the beauty is it's not you. There's the observer of those harsh criticisms that are occupying space inside your skull or in your brain, your mind. Why'd you do that? How come your neighbor never yells at her kids like that? Or she was just trying to show you something sweet. And how could you have been so abrupt? And so you'll hear that, but it doesn't mean it's you. You can create a little bit of an arm's length. Oh, there's that voice again.
Mm-hmm.
And you can name yours if you want. And you can see it as an extension of a parent or a teacher who was influential when you were growing up, but to create a little bit of distance and depersonalize it a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, there's that voice. And then to show up as the most loving, maternal, caring, or paternal version of you that you can and say, sweetheart, they're there. Oh, honey, this has been a rough one.
Mm-hmm.
This has been a rough one. And on top of having that difficult time with, Eddie, there's that voice trying to make you believe that you're failing or that you're no good or that you're a terrible mother, father. Let's blow that voice out of the water. No, you're not allowed.
Mm-hmm.
And advocate for yourself to that part that maybe has good intentions. Maybe you could speak to that voice and say, I know that you want me to be a great parent. Thank you for your clumsy attempts to do that, but we're going to go in a new direction now, and it's not going to include shame. Mm-hmm. And so, speaking to it the way you would someone who tried to shame one of your dearest friends or family members. Mm-hmm. And I sometimes would even picture having a bouncer, like the bouncer at the door of the club that says, no, you can't come in.
Mm-hmm. So
there are a lot of ways you can play with how you start setting boundaries for what is allowed to be spoken inside your own head. Mm-hmm. And counteracting some of that by this, soothing, parental, oh gosh, honey, that was a tough moment. Yeah. And there's that voice. Oh, let's just breathe. Maybe 2 or 3 breaths. Mm-hmm. Be where your feet are. Be in this present moment. Mm-hmm. Notice that you feel a little shaky, a little wobbly, a little rattled. Yeah. And, hold that part of yourself if you want, and you can move through that.
Yeah, it's that self-compassion piece, right? Which is just something that's so important, and we forget that we have these opportunities to give ourselves that gift, and really it's about being assertive. And then when we do that and we're able to internalize that, it has such a profound effect on our child. Mm-hmm. Right? And what they begin to internalize. And I know it kind of reminds me of, in your book you talk about the example, because I know one of the things that kind of goes along with this is how often we as parents take things personally. And I love if you wanted to just really briefly share the boat example.
Oh, sure.
That you have. I love that. That to me just really is just such a visual that I think is so useful.
Yeah. Okay, well, this isn't my story. It's just a story that I encountered. But, imagine that you're drifting along in a little boat and, the lake is calm. It's a beautiful day and you're just relaxing, and maybe you doze off, and then another boat. No, sorry. Something happens and, you get clobbered, and you look up and it's another boat, and you think, God, I mean, it's a big lake. Why would that boat, mm-hmm. why would the pilot or captain of that little boat have to smack right into me? There's plenty of room. Like, what's the deal? And you get all frustrated and angry, and you're telling the story of how irresponsible that person is and how disrespectful they are to, slam into your boat when they could easily have avoided it. And then you really look and you see that it's just a boat that's adrift, mm-hmm. that came loose from its mooring. And you rearrange instantly what you concluded about that event. And that's so often the case with our kids. We think they intentionally mean us harm. And in fact, a lot of their misbehavior is just an announcement that something in their life isn't working and that they need our support and guidance.
It's amazing just what that bit of mind shift will do, right? How we're able to view them and then how we're able to approach them. So thank you for that. I love that story.
Sure.
I think
Yeah,
that's
me too.
fabulous. And, Susan, I could talk with you all day long about this. And I'm so grateful for your time. I know that you're so generous in offering our viewers and listeners a free gift. Would you like to share what that is?
Sure. I actually created something just for you guys. I'm going to get the URL, or maybe you have it. Here it
We'll
is.
get it.
I created a little audio that would allow people to use a frustrating moment with their child as an exercise, the meat and potatoes of an exercise that they could follow along with in this audio. So it's a great way to explore what might be underneath a reaction, frustration, an angry outburst that you exhibit in reaction or response to something that your child does. So it's just a great way to have my help, if you would like it, in walking you through an exploration of that. I think it's just about 12 minutes, and it's just a way to kind of find your center again and work through those frustrating moments. And that's at susanstiffelman.com/empowered parent summit bonus. And all of those words have a dash between them. And I know that you'll put that in the notes as well.
Yes, it'll be in the notes. Thank you so much. Yes, because that's really what you're inviting us to do is learn this process of how we can respond to our child thoughtfully versus reacting, right?
Yeah.
Out of that impatient place. So thank you for that.
Sure.
So Susan, how can parents find you? How can they follow the incredible work that you're doing? Please let us know.
Well, everything is at susanstiffelman.com. There's all kinds of classes that we offer, very affordable, usually with scholarships for those who can't come up with the tuition, because our goal is really to support parents around the world from every walk of life. We have a monthly Parenting Without Power Struggles membership program, which I'm really, really encouraging people to explore, because it's a way to get my personal help and coaching month after month after month. It's also very affordable, and there are always specials that you can find out about to give it a try, and that is under Help for Parents on my website, susanstiffelman.com. Of course, there's a co-parenting with a narcissist that we do every month, Wendy Bahari and I, and lots of other classes. It's all there at susanstiffelman.com, and mostly I encourage people to sign up for our newsletter because you get all the updates that way.
Susan has so many amazing, what I always love is your collaborations. So you collaborate with just some of the most wonderful, many of whom are on the series, so they'll be familiar, and just these collaborations on everything from sibling rivalry to the digital world there's so many offerings that are happening all the time. And I think you just are such a wealth of knowledge and wisdom and support for parents. And again, I'm just so grateful to have had this time with you. So thank you again for joining us. Parents, I really invite you to reflect on today's conversation, this powerful conversation. Please use your journals to sort of just think about some of your biggest takeaways, especially while it's fresh in your mind, some of your biggest takeaways. Maybe there's one thing from our conversation that you want to commit to trying or to practicing, and to really just kind of allow yourself to sit with that. Go back and rewind and listen again if you think that would be helpful. But I really invite you to do that. Susan, thank you again. Parents, thank you so much for being here, for joining us, for being part of this series. And really just, it's been such an honor for me to be able to accompany you on this journey. So I'm looking forward to staying connected. I'm looking forward to staying in touch. And I look forward to meeting you hopefully one day soon. So I wish you and your families the very, very best. And thank you again for being part of the Becoming an Empowered Parent online series. I'll see you soon. Bye for now.